So here we are at Luxor Temple, dedicated to Amun. But who was Amun? Well, we're going to find out today. But the answer's probably not what you think. Perhaps the first thing we should say about Amun is that we're probably saying his name wrong. If you look at how it's spelt, we've got a feather here, which is I, not A. This is MN, and then the N is repeated. So, transliterated, it should be Imun rather than Amun. An A is a vulture in the hieroglyphic alphabet. In Luxor, you generally see him called Amun Ra or Imun Ra, and here you've got the sun disk here, and the dash is telling you it's an ideogram for Ra. So Imun Ra. But who is he? So here we see his name, and below we've got Lord of the, and people interpret these differently, but I think these look like pylons, don't they? So it's Lord of the pylons and the two lands, and down at the bottom here, Lord of the sky. The sky is one of the two lands in the netherworld. So if you read the funerary texts, you see in the coffin text, when the deceased pharaoh wakes in the afterlife, as Horus, he's made lord of the two lands in the netherworld, which are the earth and sky, the lands of Osiris's parents, Geb and Nut. So we're in the so-called chapel of Amun now, in Luxor Temple, and we can see the same thing again, look. So up the top here, we can see the big bit at the beginning says something like spoken by or spoken to. It's about the recitation, and then you've got Amun Ra below it, and Lord of the Sky again. So Amun Ra was the Lord of the Sky, this land called the sky. If we look up the top here, we see the same thing again. So we see Amun Ra, Lord of the pylons and the two lands. And if we look at the depiction of Amun Ra here, what can we take away from that? So here we see a man seated on a throne, wearing a crown, with the beard of a ruler, holding the staff of a ruler. Does this make you think of a god? That Amun Ra's a god? Or does it make you think that Amun Ra's a man? So if Amun was a ruler, king, not a god, then where did he rule? Well, one way to get an idea is if we look around us, we can look for the symbol for a city or a settlement, which is a crossroads. So if we look on the right hand wall here, higher up, we can see there's lots of crossroads. Now, I don't recognise all the names by any stretch. I'd be amazed if anybody does. But one that stands out really well is what the Greeks translate as Heliopolis. So there's this pillar, so-called, of Heliopolis, and then a little jar, which they translate as an N, and the proper name for Heliopolis is Awn, A-W-N, which in the Old Testament you see called On, and you see the crossroads symbol underneath it. So lots of these columns up here talk about Heliopolis, On. So it's reasonable to think that in the chapel of Amun, Amun could have been a ruler with responsibilities over Orn. Of course, this begs the question, where is Orn? Well, the answer to that is here too. If we look back at this end wall, which is all about Amun, which we know because we see him seated on his throne at the top, and his depiction as a ram at the side. On this wall, we can see a number of symbols representing places. One of them, which often isn't interpreted as a place but should be, we see it in a prominent position in that top corner there, which is the Eye of Horus, or as we call it. Now, this is often interpreted as a symbol meaning something like health or protection. So in that context, you think this is kind of wishing good health and protection to Amun. But sometimes, in fact frequently, you see the Eye of Horus depicted with the crossroads symbol, the symbol for a city, symbol for a settlement, which is telling you unambiguously that the Eye of Horus is a place. We see it again here in either corner. I can't see what's below it. And you often see, and this is damaged so you don't see it here, but you often see it on the front of the boat here. And in fact, in the British Museum in London, there's a statue of a boat that has the Eye of Horus on the front of it. Now, if you see a symbol on a ship, on its sail or depicted on the side, what does that symbol usually mean? It's a name, isn't it? It's a noun. Something telling you where that ship came from. We're at the back of the temple now, in one of the oldest parts, unfortunately one of the most damaged. And this wall is all about Amun, or Imun. You see his name everywhere. Imun Ra. If we look at his depiction again, here you see him seated, wearing a crown, sitting on a throne. Does that look like a depiction of a god or a king? There you see him standing, holding a staff of power, symbolic of a ruler. And generally the rulers of Jeddah, I think. Again, does that suggest he's a god or a king? So where do we get this idea that Amun, or Imun, is a god? Well, one of them is here, beneath his name. You see the flag. People read that as God. Well, why would you use a flag to mean God then? Well, if we look at the first pylon here, you see between the statues we've got these little recesses. Now, thousands of years ago, when this was an active temple, there would have been flags hanging in here, possibly hanging down from above where that hole is. So when you see a flag in a symbol, in a hieroglyph like that, and especially when you see the kind of plural symbol, multiple dashes after it, that's more likely something to do with temples and pylons at the temples, and when the flags are out in the temples, Now in England, if you see a flag on Buckingham Palace, what does that mean? It means the king's in residence, right? There's something else about this scene which everybody misses. And it's tragic that this wall was covered in plaster. To be honest, I hope it falls off as soon as possible. Which is, if you look up the top of this wall, very closely, above the arch, there's an absolutely huge Eye of Horus in a really prominent position on this wall. So let's weigh up the evidence. What have we seen? Well, on the one hand, we've seen that Amun is frequently depicted sitting on a throne, wearing a crown, and holding the staff of a ruler. We've seen that he's given many titles, including the Lord of the Two Lands, the Lord of the Three Pylons, or many pylons, depending how you want to interpret that, and the Lord of the Sky. On the other hand, what evidence have we seen that he's a god? A flag? But flags are hung on the outside of temples, on pylons. So is that a convincing hieroglyph to symbolise him as a god? I don't think so. There's also one final piece of evidence that I've saved till last, that to me is probably the most compelling. This is down one of the side corridors near the mosque, and you see something that I've seen nowhere else in Egypt. Up here, you see a cartouche. But look at the name in the cartouche. It's literally Amun. So why would his name be in a cartouche if he was a god?